Hello and welcome to Sketching a Crime Scene or any room. In this video we are going to talk about how you can go about sketching a crime scene. So step one is we're going to make a rough sketch. And what the heck is a rough sketch? Well, a rough sketch is simply just like a general layout. You're going to leave room to write your measurements in. This is not to scale or anything. This is just going to give you the basic outline of the room and the furniture in it. Okay, so for the rough sketch, I'm taking a look at the room and I'm going, what are the major features of this room? I see, there's obviously a wall right here, and then there's a wall, and in there is a door, and then I see over towards that corner there's a little boxed out thing, and then there's a wall, and on that wall there's a big old table, and then this wall does another boxy looking thing. There's a box, but then there's a counter as part of that boxed out part, right? And then that wall goes all the way out. So this, obviously, I'm not using a ruler or anything. This is really rough. It's not neat at all. I just need the rough outline of my room. So that's what I'm going to work with from now on. Step two, take your measurements. That's right, you're going to have to measure things. So first you're going to draw right into your rough sketch your measurements. You're going to clearly label what you measured. So if you're measuring the length of a wall, you're going to draw right next to it the measurement of that wall. So I suggest starting with the perimeter of the room. And here's a tip. If you're using a tape measure, you don't need to necessarily start at 0, and sometimes it may be more accurate starting at like 1 centimeter instead of 0 and subtracting 1 from your measurement. Sometimes it's iffy on where that 0 is. I'll show you what I mean. All right, so what do I mean by, it might be better to start at not 0 when using a tape measure. So if I'm looking at this tape measure, it's kind of confusing. Do I start, on this side of the metal thing? Do I go to the inside? Do I start right there? Where do I actually start? The correct answer is you'd want to line it up with the inside of that metal, and then you'd want to take your measurement based off of that. But that can be kind of confusing, right? So what I was saying was you might want to start at something other than 0. You might want to start at something like maybe 10. So then I can put the thing I'm measuring on 10, and I'll get a much more accurate measurement that way. So feel free to use that tip as you're measuring the room.
Alright, so in this next section, you can see me do one of the measurements for the wall. It's kind of tough because I'm working by myself, but luckily the hinge on that door, I can attach my tape measure to. And little things that you need to avoid is, you see how my tape measure's sagging? You don't want that. You want to pull it tight when you make your measurement. And the reason for that is if there's sag, then you're measuring the sag as well and not actually the length of the wall. So you pull it tight, you make your measurement, and you record it. So now here's a quick little time lapse of me doing that for everything in the room. So I take all my measurements and I draw them onto my rough sketch. So here they are showing up on my rough sketch. And then I end up with a single drawing with all the measurements that I need.
Step 3, determine your scale. Okay, so how are you going to determine your scale? Well, you got to figure out, how am I going to fit the dimensions of the room onto the page? So you're going to take a look at the longest wall, centimeters. So how long is your longest wall? And what is the length of your paper? What is the longest dimension of the paper? And you're going to divide those to get you your scale factor. So now you may want to round this number up to a convenient number to use. For example, if I did this division and I got 22.1, instead I might just want to round that up to like 25 because it's easier for me to scale things by 25 instead of 22.1. And here's another note. Make sure the scale works for the width as well. All of it must fit into the paper. So if like you got this odd shaped room or it's not shaped like a paper, you want to make sure that just because the length fit doesn't mean the width will fit too. You want to make sure that they both fit.
So first we're going to have to determine, how long is each wall. So if we're taking a look, I need to know how long is it from here all the way to over here, because that's what's got to fit on the paper. So I got to look at my other measurements. I got 504 centimeters for that wall, and I have 72 for this wall, so I end up with 576 centimeters as my one length. And what about my width? I got to know from this wall all the way down to there. So let me take a look. This one's real easy. It's just this measurement right here, 475 centimeters. So now that I have those numbers, I'm going to have to jump over to a spreadsheet program. This is what I would use. I would use Google Sheets or Excel or something. So now I can just type in and have it do the math for me. So what is the length of the room? The length of the room I got was, I think, 576 centimeters. And the length of the paper, so I'm going to get a ruler and I'm going to measure my paper, and I trust you all can figure out what that's going to look like. But I measure the length of my paper and I find it out to be 27 centimeters. And now to figure out the scale, this is what's great about spreadsheets. I can have it do the math. First thing you do is press the equal sign. That's telling it that you're going to do some math. And you do the length of the room divided by the length of the paper, and then press enter. So now I got a scale of 21.33 repeating. So if I used 21.3 repeating as my scale, it would fit snugly to my paper. But I also got to concern myself with the width of the room. So I measured that width to be 475 centimeters, and now I measure the width of my paper, and I measure it to be 20 centimeters. So now I do the same thing, equals the width of the room divided by the width of the paper, and I get 23.75. So now, which one do I want to use? If anything, I'd want to use this 23.75, but that's kind of a weird number to use as a scale, and I like to leave myself some room on the paper in case I got to write something in the little margins. So what I would do is round that up to a number that's nicer to use. Maybe, let's say 25. And then that way, if I do a 1 to 25 scale, everything will fit on my paper.
Step 4, convert your measurements. You got to scale it down. All those things that you measured in real life, you got to scale it down to the size of the paper. So how do you do that? Well, I would highly suggest using a spreadsheet. And the way that you're going to use a spreadsheet is you can divide each measurement by your scale factor, and you can plug in an equation so that all you got to do is type in your measurement and it'll scale it for you. So here's a tip. Write the scaled measurement into your rough sketch in a different color for ease. So when you're going to do your final sketch, you can look at your rough sketch and go, okay, it needs to be exactly this long, and you'll have that as reference.
So let's take a look at this spreadsheet and have it do some more math for us. What I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to enter my measurements into one cell. And over here you can see scale down measurement in centimeters. And the scale that I'm going to use is 1 to 25. So to figure out, all right, well, if it's 475 centimeters in real life, how many centimeters should that be on my page? All you're going to do is press equals, click on the real life measurement, and then divide by the scale that you're using, which is 25, and press enter. So now that 19 is telling me that on my paper, that length has to be actually 19 centimeters, and it represents 475 centimeters in real life. So now I'm going to do that for the rest of my measurements. So here are all my measurements. Now watch this shortcut. It's awesome. So you did the math already in this cell that says 19. I press enter. Click on it, and that little blue square, just double tap it, and it will fill in all of that for you. It's doing the same math that you told the first cell to do, but it's doing it for all your measurements. So now I got all my measurements scaled down. What I would recommend is now you're going to want to write those into your rough sketch so that you can refer to them pretty easily.
Step 5, draw your sketch. Now that you have all the measurements and it's all scaled down, actually draw that sketch. So little notes for you. Start with the perimeter. That's always a good place to start. Draw the outline of the room. And then use the lines on the paper. So we're going to be using graph paper. Use those to guide you, making straight lines as well as like 90-degree angles. So, yeah. Alright, so I have my rough sketch with all my measurements. I have a pencil and I have a ruler. So now I'm ready to make my final sketch. So the good thing about using graph paper is you're able to have references for drawing straight lines, so you know if you're going straight across or if you're wiggling a bit or not. So let's take a look at how we're going to draw that. So I have this wall is where I'm going to start, the one with the door, and I see that it has to be 20.24 centimeters long. So I have my initial mark right here in the corner, so that's this corner right there, and now I got to draw 20.24 centimeters. Now when you use a ruler, you want to make sure that you're lining up the 0 and not the end of the ruler with your point. So I put my ruler right there, I measure out to 20.24 centimeters, and I push down on my ruler to hold it in place, and I start lightly with my pencil, and then I get a little bit heavier to make sure that I got it. So now I got my first line drawn, and now it's just a matter of repeating that over and over.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, your final sketch, drawn to scale. Now you're ready to measure where the evidence is and triangulate it into your final sketch. So how about we do a little review of the steps? Remember, step 1 is going to be to make a rough sketch. Step 2 is going to be to take your measurements. Step 3, determine your scale. Step 4, convert those measurements. And step 5, draw your sketch. That's it.